I would like to start as the coordinator of the Ontario branch of WDI, which is Women's Declaration International. I'd like to invite any women in attendance to sign the Declaration for Women's Sex-Based Rights and to join WDI. You can do this by visiting womensdeclaration.com. WDI has branches across the globe consisting of women who refuse to lay down our rights to safe single-sex spaces. We stand together in the face of misogyny and mass gaslighting to protect the rights of women and girls everywhere. So, my 11-year-old daughter came home from school one day and told me that there was a boy in the girls' washroom. She had gone to school with this student for years, and they had always been a boy, but they had suddenly began to identify as a girl. This does not change how all of the girls feel in that room. That student's identification does not change that. When I asked her how she felt, she said it was the end of the day. There were lots of girls in there, so she felt okay, but she would have been afraid if she had been alone. I approached the principal about this and was told that if my daughter felt uncomfortable, she could use a single-stall gender-neutral space for her washroom. I, of course, asked at this point, why can the student who is identifying out of their birth sex not use this space? And was told that, according to the board, they are not allowed to ask them to do that. At this point, I approached the parent council, and most of the parents agreed with me. Sadly, most of them only told me this after the meeting. People are afraid. Nobody wants to voice these concerns out loud anymore. But they did agree. I then approached the school board. I tried to address them at the public meeting. After a series of phone calls trying to discourage me from speaking and being ghosted, I was allowed to speak at the private meeting, which was basically talking to them as they ate their dinner. They were very dismissive. At the end of the meeting, one of the trustees asked why I was not allowed to voice these concerns at the public meeting because I did not mention even the school. I was speaking to the broader issue. She was immediately shut down by the chair. So that's how that went. I'll read for you now the speech that I had intended to share at the public meeting. I stand before you today as a woman, a mother, and as a survivor of sexual assault. I think everyone on this board would agree with the notion that we should protect girls from sexual violence. I'm here to explain why denying girls safe, segregated spaces away from genetically male students opens them up to increased risk of sexual assault. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 99% of perpetrators of sexual violence are male, and 91% of sexual assault victims are female. This clearly shows us that natal males are substantially more likely to commit sexual assault against natal females. According to a study from the Correctional Services of Canada, 45% of transgender identified inmates in Canada are behind bars for sexual offenses. To put that into perspective, 13.9% of the male prison population is behind bars for sex crimes. Think about that. This can only mean one of two things. Either males who identify as trans are more than 3 times as likely as other males to commit acts of sexual violence, or sex predators will pose as transgender women in order to access victims. Perverts and rapists are not above lying. We know this. Either way, it's clear that allowing self-ID in our schools is opening girls up to sexual assault. Another thing I believe we can all agree on is that we want to prevent the children in our schools from committing suicide or attempting to do so. That's one of the main reasons we are being told to blindly affirm these kids when they come out as trans and to allow them into spaces which were meant for the opposite sex. According to the American Association of Suicidology, multivariate analyses showed that women and girls with histories of sexual assault in both childhood and adulthood reported significantly greater odds of lifetime suicide attempts. I don't know why this is not being taken into consideration, but it should be. Self-reported statistics tell us that 41% of transgender individuals have attempted suicide. According to statistics from the UK, US, and Canada, there's been an over 4,000% increase in youth being referred to gender clinics in the past decade. One more statistics I'll give you on this matter is that according to the new edition of America's Health Rankings, Health of Women and Children report from the United Health Foundation, there's been a 29% jump in teen suicides in the past decade. Putting the last 3 statistics together, we are left with only a couple of possibilities. Either the 4,000% increase in trans kids indicates a severe social contagion that should be heavily discouraged before more children are unnecessarily medicalized, or it's not dangerous not to immediately affirm a child's trans identity. If it was, why has there been an increase in teen suicides since our society has become more accepting and affirming? Where was the epidemic of gender nonconforming kids taking their lives? Is it possible that we are putting girls at risk of suicide due to sexual assault in order to soothe the feelings of a group of people who are 60 to 90% likely to change their minds about their transition according to all 12 studies done on youth with gender dysphoria? Victims of sexual assault cannot change their minds to escape their trauma. I know the principal of my daughter's school, as well as I'm sure many, almost everyone, loves to go on about kindness. But where is the kindness for victims of sexual assault? Why does the terror they feel when forced into a confined space with a person who has the physical attributes necessary to assault them not matter? Are girls really that insignificant, or is everyone just afraid of saying and doing the right thing? Worse still, voyeurism and indecent exposure are no longer crimes at all, so long as the perpetrators claim to be transitioning. And unless you truly believe that sexual predators are above lying to gain access to vulnerable girls, you have to see the problem here. How is a girl to differentiate between a transgender girl and a boy who wants to watch her undress or possibly assault her? How is anyone to differentiate between them? If you are wondering why we haven't seen an influx of sexual assault cases at schools, I have one more statistic for you. For every 100 instances of sexual assault, only 6 are reported. How much lower do you think that number gets when the perpetrator is a member of a protected class? One of the main reasons victims keep quiet is fear that they won't be believed or they will face backlash. If we follow this to its logical conclusion, we wind up with girls being forced to change for gym class in front of males at best. At worst, we wind up with rapes and assaults, which we are already seeing in the United States. I have to ask, is it kind to force girls to undress in spaces they no longer feel comfortable in? To give them the message that their consent is conditional? Do you feel good, or does anyone feel good, about implying that girls are transphobes and bigots if they want private spaces to change away from males? Is it a good idea to encourage girls to ignore their natural instinct to be wary of males in certain situations? It's not. I'm aware of the law. I'm also aware that the law is not a moral compass. We will all have to live with ourselves if we sit back and allow this to happen out of ignorance or fear of the consequences we may face. I implore everyone to do everything in their power to rectify this injustice before this dangerous situation becomes a tragedy or several. Thank you.
Thank you.